Hi, this is Jim Cunningham. I have Alissa Kroeger with me, and we're going to talk about retiring in California. How does it work, and is it for you? What the heck am I talking about here? Well, what I'm talking about is for some people, they love California. They may have grown up here and they're not leaving, right? That may be you. You may say, I'm ready to get out of here because I've heard all the negative stuff. Um, and I don't see a way that I can retire in California. And there are other people who say, you know what? I've always wanted to live in California. I want to get back to California. And now I'm retiring and now I can finally go back or move to California, something I've always done. So what are the myths and the realities? What are the benefits and drawbacks of retiring in California? And really, it's about making an informed decision for your retirement. And you need to determine what's best for you, not what's best for somebody else or what's best for your friend or whomever. But really, this is a very personal decision. And we're going to look at the cost of living, tax implications, and amenities, which are great in California. Just the natural beauty of California. It's kind of hard to dismiss that, quite frankly. And is this the right place for you in your golden years? And everyone wants peace of mind. I will tell you something about retirement is a lot of people are worried about retirement. A lot of people have anxiety about retirement. A lot of people don't. Okay. But some people are worried about, well, what am I going to do? What kind of, who am I after I retire? We're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about physically where to retire. And if you do choose to retire in California, what that looks like from a financial aspect. And that's why we've got Alissa Kroeger here from Ascent Wealth Management. I'm Jim Cunningham. I'm a partner at Cunningham Legal. I've been an attorney for 30 years now this year. It's hard to believe. I'm a certified specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law, securities, and insurance licensed, and a pilot single engine land instrument rated. Got a lot of time in a Cherokee 6. I'm not current. These are the attorneys in our firm. We keep adding attorneys as the months go by, and we're actually looking for a couple of more. So if you know anyone, or if you're watching this and you're a lawyer, don't hesitate to reach out. And we're going to be talking with Alissa Kroeger. She's a partner at Ascent Wealth Management, and they are based in Southern California with offices in Northern California as well. So I happen to be in Northern California, and Alissa is in Southern California. So I'm in Giants territory. You're in Dodgers territory, Alissa, but we're both Californians.
Even
So,
my 2-year-old knows when the Dodgers are playing. She says
well,
it
they
in
should. They're
her.
winning.
She looks
We're
at the
Giants.
she looks at the TV and it's like Dodgers. I'm like, yep,
Do you want to talk about the disclaimer before we get started?
sure. So we are not making any guarantees. We're not making any predictions. Everything that we are going to discuss is hypothetical. They're case studies. It's not specific to your situation. Anything that would be specific to your situation would require thorough analysis and an individualized meeting with each and every one of you. Hopefully we get the opportunity. Nothing that we're saying here is to be used for your own personal situation. We offer securities through Cambridge. They are our registered broker dealer. We are also registered investment advisor through Cooper McManus. So we have dual licenses, which makes us a hybrid firm, which allows us to be able to do what's in the best interest of our clients. We are not affiliated with them. We don't work for them. However, we are affiliated with them. We don't work for them. We are a completely independent firm.
And I'm a lawyer. Here's our legal disclaimer, and then we'll get to the material. But basically, what this says is this is not legal advice. When I say you, there's no attorney-client relationship. And don't watch this and just go out and do a bunch of stuff on your own. It's a really bad idea. What we're talking about is very sophisticated, very nuanced subject matter over and as you will see, over a course of many years. So retirement, I think, too often, and I will talk this. This is like factors in considering retirement and thinking about retirement. There's typically a period where you stop earning an income. So you stop with earned income. Let's say it's maybe 60 or whatever it is. There's typically a period of time where you have no earned income, and then your required minimum distributions start right now at age 73. And depending on your age, they could start as high as 75, starting in 2033 if you reach 75 in 2033 or later. So there's this period of time where you may not have a lot of earned income. And that's the time when a lot of people travel, right? So in their 60s, it's called the go-go years. In your 60s, the 70s is your slow-go years. And the 80s, unfortunately, for many people, is your no-go years. Of course, your 60s could be your no-go years if your health is not where you want it to be. And I will tell you, people who have their health, there's a long list of things that people want to do. But if you don't have your health, there's only one thing you want, which is your health. And unfortunately, sometimes that's just simply out of our control. Certainly, some of it's within our control, obviously, but sometimes things just happen, and you don't have your health. So if that's you, I understand in talking to other clients what that can mean. And if you have your health, that's fantastic. So what are factors to consider in retiring in general? Well, I know proximity to kids and grandkids and other family and friends is, I think, for a lot of people, a big driving consideration. Culture. What do I mean by culture? Do I want to live here? Do I want to live in this place? And I think for many Californians who go to other states, okay, that can be a culture shock. And this is the feedback I'm getting from clients who move. So also, what are you into? What sort of activities do you like? If you like to mountain bike and hike, Marin County is just a fantastic place. Happens to be super expensive to live in, but you could hike and bike literally every day of the year. And it has to be the right fit. So for you, right, what works for somebody else might not be for you. You might say, hey, I'm ready to move to Tennessee. I'm going to get that 40 acres and a lawnmower and sit down, and that's my thing, and I'm ready to leave California. Great, that's for you. That may not be for somebody else. They may say, gee, I really like the ocean, I like sailing, San Diego is my place to be. And so that it's different.
I fit in
different
that category.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
I'm a San Diego lover, so
Right, and that goes to weather and climate. Some of these places are very cold, and you can't do the things you necessarily want to do, just given the weather and the climate. Cost of housing, we're gonna, that is really something that is very challenging in California, or can be challenging. But there are other housing options. Okay, there are other places to live in California that aren't as expensive, and we'll see. We'll have an example of that when somebody moves. State and local income tax and capital gains tax. This is a biggie. So California, if you are making money, if you're making over $50,000 a year, you're starting to pay tax. If you make under $50,000 a year, it's a nothing burger. I'm telling you, it's not a big deal. So if you're in that gap of period, right, that gap of time where maybe you have cash savings and retirement accounts, but no other income and you're retired, taxes really just aren't a big deal in California, unless, of course, you're doing a Roth conversion. We'll talk about that. And then county and local property taxes. So California, a biggie for many people, is having the protection of Prop 13. And so keeping those low property taxes. We cover that a lot in other webinars, and we're going to touch on that today. So let's talk about, Alissa, I know you have clients all over the country, right?
Yes.
So people reach out to you from all over the country. So it's not uncommon for someone to reach out from New York or New Jersey and say, hey, I saw some of your videos and I'd like to talk to you. And other people leave California and move to other states. And so if you're watching this on a video, these are the top marginal individual income tax rates as of 2020. And you can see California, New York, New Jersey, Minnesota, surprisingly, is high. Do you see people, Alissa, in your practice moving for state income tax reasons? Is that something that people move for?
That is pretty much the other circumstances would drive them out of state. However, that is probably the largest reason why people would move. We actually, shockingly enough, I don't want to live in South Dakota, but one of our clients, or a few of our clients, actually moved to South Dakota. And one of the main places that they were moving from is our local area here. Right. The biggest transplants were coming from our local area to South Dakota. So that is definitely a driver for clients.
Yeah. And you can see, if you're moving for taxes, some of these jurisdictions, some of these other states are less. Now, these are the marginal rates. And it's important to understand that Oregon's is a lot flatter, meaning if you earn $50,000 a year in Oregon, you're paying more tax than you are in California. Also, what we're not discussing is death taxes. So Washington has a 20% death tax on assets a little bit over 2 million. Oregon's is up to 16% on assets over $1 million. So those are two states that Californians look to many times to retire. But bear in mind that if you're a resident of one of those states, your worldwide assets are subject to that death tax, and that is imposed. That's a real tax. There's no gift tax. So if you're thinking about moving to Washington or Oregon, you need to pay attention to all of the taxes if you care. So this is one of the things, Alissa, that we start with when we meet with clients who may have tax issues is, how much do you care about this? Because, I would say broadly speaking, most people care about taxes. Money is money, but many people simply are willing to accept certain taxes for a trade-off, and it's not as important. Like they don't get they don't turn bright red when they think about,
Well, you
state income tax, right?
Well, you bring up Washington. That's a great
Mhm.
point. Some people move to Washington because they want no state income tax.
Right,
They haven't thought about what happens to my beneficiaries. What
right,
happens when I die? What
right.
are the implications to them? And so when you start looking at this from both ends while you're alive and after death, if you haven't thought about both ends, maybe you don't care about after you die, but if you do, which is exactly why you have an estate plan, if you do, then certainly that's in question and that should drive some of your decision-making processes.
I mean, it's actually, if we can just stay on the state death tax for a while, let's say somebody passes away and the only thing they have is a $5 million IRA, that's going to be about a $600,000 tax bill.
Yeah.
Now, because that's included in your estate if you're a Washington resident, how are you going to pay that? Are you going to come up with the 600,000? Well, your family might have to withdraw 1.2 million, pay 600,000 in income tax to then turn around and pay $600,000 in death tax. So this is where there are no easy cookie cutter solutions because every situation is different. And a $5 million estate, for many of our clients, they say, I have barely enough to retire on. If all you had was 5 million in IRAs, for a lot of people, that may not be enough to sustain their lifestyle. And it also subjects them to
Well, and
estate tax. Yeah,
if all your net worth is tied up in illiquid assets like real estate or business interest,
right.
again,
Same
how are
deal.
you going to pay that tax bill?
Right. You got to come up with the money.
Right.
So income tax benefits of being a California resident, shockingly, and I probably should even put this in the webinar because I don't want California to find out about this one because they're missing out on a lot of money. Lotto winnings are state income tax free. Crazy, right? Kind of weird. Social Security, municipal bond interest, that is California municipal bond interest, life insurance proceeds, workers' comp benefits, inheritances and gifts are not taxed by California. Now, of course, inheritances and gifts are taxed federally. If you have a California municipal bond portfolio and you move to New York, you lose the state income tax-free aspect, and you would have to report that income in New York on your state return. So many of our clients go back and forth from New York or New Jersey and California. So that a lot of people in the financial space or entertainment space are going back and forth between these three states. And just bear in mind, you need to pay attention. If you own municipal bonds, you need to pay attention to this interest aspect. CalPERS and CalSTRS are not taxed. These are the state retirement systems. If it's a service-connected disability pension paid to a retiree disabled to the job or job-related injury or illness. So very narrow exception. So if that's you, just understand that, if you fit that description, then your retirement is not subject to state income tax.
Yeah, I almost got excited here on this one, but it's not that exciting. My husband's a STRS. He'll have a pension, but no, it is definitely taxable.
And
unless,
hopefully,
God forbid, he doesn't get disabled or anything like that.
Exactly. Hopefully, he's not disabled due to work. Hopefully, he has a long and healthy retirement. And that's something to really pay attention to because, again, this goes to the individual aspect of this. Now, I will tell you, and also veterans receiving disability retirement pay or payments under the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs are also exempt. So if you're getting some type of disability payment from the VA, that's exempt. So this is important because one sort of classic example is the couple, typically, I mean, it could be a single person, but a couple who retires from the state of California or some other public agency. And, they might be getting $80,000, $100,000 a year each in retirement, which is a lot of money. That is subject to state income tax. Believe it or not, if you move to a state that has no state income tax, like Nevada, and you mentioned South Dakota or Tennessee, there is no California state income tax on your California source pension. There was a U.S. Supreme Court case on that, and California fought it. Okay, states fought it and lost at the U.S. Supreme Court level. So understand you can move from California, even though you're a California retiree, you're not going to be subject to California state income tax. Let's look at some really big monetary benefits of being and dying a California resident. So we're estate planning. We're going to talk about death. I hate to say it. Property that is community property. Now, what am I talking about? Property that is acquired during marriage, that is not has not been received as a gift or inheritance. All property acquired during marriage that is not a gift or inheritance is community property unless there is an agreement to the contrary. So a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement. So what does this mean? Well, we have Abel and Baker. Abel and Baker are married. In 1980, Abel and Baker bought a property for $1 million. When Abel dies in 2024, the property's worth $10 million. Now, this is not uncommon. You mentioned San Diego, how much you love San Diego. This is not uncommon in San Diego to have bought a house in 1980, by the way. $1 million was a lot of money to pay for a house. Okay. A lot of money. I mean, it's probably, the numbers are probably off, quite frankly. When Abel dies in 2024, Baker is the surviving spouse. Baker receives an adjusted cost basis. Now, this means that Baker could sell the property for $10 million and pay no capital gains tax. That's because the property was community property. So very, very important. Now, another example is Abel and Baker are married in 1990. I don't know why I changed the, well, this is, they bought a property in 80. Well, maybe 1990 they get married, right? Or in 1990 they bought they're married, and in 1990 they buy the stock. So 10 years later they buy $1 million in stock. That's worth 10 million. Again, Baker's going to receive an adjusted cost basis. Baker can sell the stock for 10 million and pay no capital gains tax. So these are the two biggies, right? Alissa, when we're working with clients, they say, gee, I have a really big real estate portfolio and we don't want to sell it because we have to pay capital gains tax. And the other one is the big stock portfolio. And they say, geez, we just can't sell. These stocks will incur such a heavy capital gains tax. But this is really important. You do not get a full adjusted basis if your title is wrong. What am I talking about? If Abel and Baker hold this property as joint tenants, title controls, under law, there's only a 50% adjusted cost basis, okay? So holding property as joint tenancy, the black letter law says you only get a 50% adjustment in cost basis. That is why if you have a living trust, you would certainly want to have that in your living trust, or maybe have it Abel and Baker not as joint tenants, but realistically, if you've got a $10 million property or a $10 million portfolio of assets, you're going to want a living trust, and you're going to want to have these assets in the trust so that you can get the community property treatment. Now, it's very important. If Abel and Baker move to a separate property state, let's say they move to Colorado. Colorado is not a community property state. On the stock, Abel and Baker are only going to get a 50% adjusted cost basis. On the real estate, it's a little different. Because on the real estate, it started out as community property, and then Abel and Baker moved to Colorado, which is not a community property state. So every year it becomes less and less community property. So is it the increase in value? What is it? It's very complicated. Okay. There's no easy answer. So if you're thinking about moving from California and have appreciated assets, and you move to a state that is not a community property state, you really do need to pay attention to this. And I will say, very few estate planning lawyers understand the nuance on this. And certainly, I think significantly less financial advisors understand this. But this sort of moving between states can have a real outsized impact. Title controls at death. Title really, really matters. So if Abel and Baker are married, they buy a property for $1 million, and title is in Baker's name as sole and separate property. Maybe they had to refinance the property, right? And Abel had some creditor issues. And so the lender said, gee, you can get a better rate if Abel's not on title. So Abel transfers the property to Baker as Baker's sole and separate property. This is actually very common. And you might be going, oh, gee, that's me if you're listening to this. Because the property's titled as sold and separate property in Baker's name, when Abel dies, there is no adjustment in cost basis. So when Baker sells that, it's going to be subject to a $9 million capital gain, which is about $3 million in tax, state and federal in California, as of the date that we're doing this, which is September 2024. So we don't know what's going to happen next year. What are the community property states? If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see a map. They're Washington, Idaho, Wisconsin, California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Louisiana. Okay. There are some what we call opt-in states: Florida, Alaska, Kentucky, South Dakota, and Tennessee. And you, of course, you can opt out from community property treatment with a prenuptial or a post-nuptial, sort of before or after marriage agreement. So looking at this map, Alissa, a lot of clients end up moving to states that are not community property states.
Yeah. I think South Dakota and Tennessee are opt-in states, so that's helpful. Idaho is another state that we see a lot of clients move to, but Florida is now an opt-in state. So there's other states too that are on here that aren't opt-in states. I think a lot of the states that we see clients move to are part of this threshold. However, if you move outside of these states, then it's really something that you need to look at revising your estate plan and being cognizant of the post-death treatment of your assets.
And you know what? I don't think people are really thinking about this, Alissa, because when they reach out to us and they say, gee, I've moved to Colorado. I need to update my estate plan. It's like, well, wait a minute. Did you kind of go through the laundry list of issues? We moved to Colorado because my spouse is terminally ill and we want to be closer to our kids. I mean, that would be clearly an example where you really want to pay attention to this. Now, does this mean that you cannot get does this mean you're precluded from getting an adjustment in cost basis? No. And this is what the opt-in states are. These states have trusts, and we've covered that in another webinar, but basically they have community property trusts, which you don't need if you're a California resident. But if you're a resident of a separate property state, there is a way that you can, through use of either LLCs or use of titling of your investment portfolio, you can get adjusted cost basis on property. The one big exception, here's the big exception. This does not apply to annuities and does not apply to retirement accounts. I'm talking IRAs and 401ks. What am I talking about? Meaning if I have $1 million IRA and my wife passes away and it's community property, I can't just take all that money out of my IRA and not pay tax. So those are two exclusions. And this is one of the downsides, quite frankly, of an annuity. And we're not here to talk about annuities per se, but before you jump in to an annuity, or even if you have an annuity, you really need to pay attention to the tax aspect of that annuity, because it's all income tax. And in many times the gain, so if you put in 100,000 and that annuity is worth $1 million, a lot of times that $900,000 gain is taxable as income, like when you die. There are some exceptions on that, and there's some ways to plan around that. I think we've covered in other webinars, but very important to understand, if you have an annuity and a big gain on the annuity, that can be a real tax trap. And I know, Alissa, you work a lot on those, right?
Yes. Annuities are they're a very complex type of product and investment solution. Any advice that you get or hear on the street about annuities is probably not relevant to your particular situation. There's about 30,000 different types of annuities. There's multiple carriers out there. So they're sold or put into somebody's situation for a specific purpose, and everybody's purpose could be different. Income versus accumulation, buffers, et cetera. Like Jim, you said, we're not here to sell annuities, but they're very complex. The bottom line is they're very complex. How you title them, how you title your beneficiaries, what that means to you. All of those factors need to be analyzed by a professional. And I would not have your neighbor tell you about their situation and have it pertain to your situation. A lot of that is just noise that we can help filter through, and working with a financial professional can really help weed out the noise.
Joni asks, what does opt-in mean for community property? Opt-in means that these states offer community property trusts that must be set up. So if you're a separate property resident, let's say you're a resident of Colorado and you're really worried about that brokerage account that you're not getting community property treatment on, you could set up a trust, for example, in Florida with a Florida trustee. So there's a little bit of effort in there, but you can get community property treatment on those assets. So very, very important. So let's look at an example. Abel and Baker, this is tax benefits of dying a California resident. What about moving to North Carolina? So a lot of people move to North Carolina. It's beautiful. A lot of it's Ashland. Ashland's in North Carolina, isn't it? A beautiful place for hiking if you like hiking. Four Seasons Light. Abel and Baker are married. They buy $1 million in stock, and now it's worth $10 million. They move from California to North Carolina. Abel dies because North Carolina is not a community property state. There's only partial adjusted cost basis, which means the basis of the stock is now $5.5 million, not $10 million. So when Baker sells the stock, it's subject to 20% tax on $4.5 million or $900,000 plus local state income tax. If Abel and Baker had held this as community property, Baker would have saved $900,000 in federal tax only. So this is important. So if Abel and Baker move to North Carolina, they're going to want to meet with their A team. And what is the A team? It's me, it's Alissa, it's your CPA. If you don't have a CPA, we've got a few CPAs to pick from, and we kind of look at your individual situation and come up with a game plan to maximize the tax benefit. And this, I would say to squander the ability to get an adjusted cost basis on assets when a spouse dies is probably one of the single biggest mistakes people make, biggest mistakes that people can make and do make in the creation and transfer of multi-generational wealth, because the idea is you want to cut out the government as much as you can, right? I don't think the federal government needs, I don't think they need any more money. They got plenty of money and they can print it. So I don't know how fair taxes are, but anyway, that's probably more of a political, philosophical discussion. Very, very important. California's Medicaid program, which California's implementation is called Medi-Cal. There has been tremendous movement on this year. What am I talking about? Well, California's Medicaid program, this is healthcare for poor people. Medicare is healthcare for old people and disabled people. Medi-Cal is basically healthcare for poor people. And if you're old and poor, right, you can get both. But California's Medi-Cal is a needs-based program funded with California federal funds, and it's designed to help pay for medical care, long-term care for people who are low income. Now, provides insurance to 1/3 of California's population, and being on Medi pays your Part B premium, maybe a Part D premium. But here's where I'm going with this: is the rules have been changed on Medi-Cal, and so what I am talking about is the elimination of asset limits. Now, it used to be you could only have 2,000 or you could only have 100-odd thousand. Now, effectively, if you do this right, you can have an unlimited amount of assets and still qualify for Medi-Cal. So what we're talking about here typically is long-term care Medi-Cal. So mom has a stroke. She's got $2,035 a month in Social Security benefits and $2,000 a month in interest income from savings and required minimum distributions from her IRA. Mom's share of cost is $4,000 a month, and the state of California picks up the other $11,000 a month. So she can have savings and RMDs and other assets, right, and still qualify for Medi-Cal. Now, what some people are doing is they are doing special trusts. They're called OBRA 93 trusts. This is something we can help people within our firm to set up a trust to really maximize the benefit. So they look at income on a monthly basis. So what you would do is you would have a trust that does not distribute your dividend income, your interest income. It's not counted, right? Your RMDs are going to be counted. But the asset limit has gone away. So California, I would say, by far has the most generous benefits when it comes to an elder, frankly, going to a nursing home, right? Just a big picture, right? Because nursing home is like $15,000 a month now. It's crazy expensive. Let's talk about Prop 13. So Prop 13 is California's property tax system. Alissa, I would think people know about Prop 13, don't they?
I think older people who've
Yes.
held their houses for a really long time with very low cost on their property taxes know about it. And there's a reason why they've either stayed in their house or tried to move to a similar cost house, which is hard to do. But yeah, I think a lot of older people do. I don't think younger people know about it as much.
Well, so here's the thing. If to keep your Prop 13 benefits, and what we're talking about here is kind of moving your house. So if you own a home and you move, if you move outside of California, you lose Prop 13 because Prop 13 is not federal. Prop 13 is California. So if you move to a state other than California, that Prop 13 tax just, benefit can evaporate. It can go away, right? So if you just sell it to some random person and move to Tennessee, you're not going to take your low property, your Prop 13 taxes with you. But let's have an example here. So this is a home. I actually pulled this off of the internet. This is a $622,000 home with $162 a month HOA, and the taxes are about $7,000 a year. So in our example, Charlie and Delta sell their condo in Daly City for $700,000. They say, we're out of here. It's too cold. We want to move to, this is in Lincoln. This is on a golf course, right? So a lot of people say, gee, it's too expensive. Houses are too expensive in California. It's pretty nice for $700,000, right? Now, this is a 55 and over community, and they sell their condo for $700,000. They paid $200,000 for it. So in this case, Charlie and Delta are able to sell their condo and they don't pay any capital gains tax because the gain is $500,000. That's Internal Revenue Code Section 121 exemption. So if it's your home and you sell it, you exempt that $200,000 in gain. Well, they can take all that $700,000 and they can pay cash. They write a check for their home in Lincoln and they take their property taxes with them. And so the property taxes are about $2,000 a year. That's saving $5,000 a year. Now, I will tell you, if you may pay about this in a nice place in Texas or Tennessee. It is possible. I would say if it's comparable to Lincoln, if you think housing costs are less in these other states, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. It depends on the neighborhood you live in. So your property taxes in Texas would probably be $20,000 a month, a year, a month. Property tax would be about $20,000 a year. It's about 3% in Texas. So I know that because my parents moved there and they're about 3%. So important to kind of look at this. So you go, gee, my taxes are $2,000 or $20,000. That's $18,000 a year. It's a lot of money, right? So it's not all bad staying in California and keeping your Prop 13. California has stable property taxes. So why is this important? Because under the state constitution, they can't raise your, if you have Prop 13, they can only raise your taxes 2% a year. Okay. So if the states or if the local county or city votes in a higher tax, they can't just raise your taxes. So in retirement, maybe talk about that. How important is it to have predictable expenses, Alissa?
Very important to have predictable expenses. We have clients that are we've seen clients retire at any spectrum. So multiple millions in the bank, not a lot of money in the bank, a couple 100,000. And we've, being able to coordinate with them and dig into their expenses and keep them on a defined budget can get them retired and stay retired in California. However, when you have X amount and it's a smaller pot of money to work with, and that's supposed to get you over your longevity for your lifespan, a threshold or a quick move between a couple $1,000s can blow up your plan. And so making sure that you have a dialed in budget and stick to it is really important, especially if we're dealing with a smaller pot of money to get you retired and keep you retired.
Yeah, let's go back to Charlie and Delta. So let's put a little more, give you a little more facts. Let's say Delta has been diagnosed with dementia, and it's not good. And Charlie and Delta know that Delta only has maybe a few years of really enjoying life on a golf course. Charlie kind of knows in Charlie's gut that Delta's going to end up going to a skilled nursing care facility for $15,000 a month. They're much better off in California than they would be moving to Texas or Tennessee, because those public assistance benefits are not nearly as generous. Charlie may have to sell the house, move into maybe a low income senior housing apartment. It gets pretty grim. So I would say, again, this has to do with your health. It has to do with kind of where you are in the retirement, whether you're 60 or 75 or 80, probably drives a little bit of the decision making. But I really would not underestimate the ability to access or tap into California's public assistance benefits. Now, as a California taxpayer, you may say, gee, well, that's a lot of money going out the door. By the way, the federal government pays for half of it. So California is paying the other half. So it is not, I guess it's only half as bad anyway. Depends on your perspective. So if you're receiving the benefits, it's great. We do have, I do, normally we don't put these questions in here, but I do want to put a question in here. Anonymous asks, are annuities in an IRA a trap also? My financial planner had me put my IRA in annuities.
No.
Without knowing anything else. Alissa, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would not say it's a trap. There are a number of reasons why you might do that. It's really specific to everybody's situation. Sometimes people only have IRA assets and they need an income stream. So there's not a lot of options. It's really specific to the client, to be perfectly honest.
I did see that maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the fees are very high. And what ends up happening is you're kind of paying fees on fees. One of the benefits of an annuity is that account grows on a tax deferred basis. Well, you have that anyway with your IRA. It's going to grow on a tax deferred basis.
Right.
Okay. Howland Wanda by Greenacre in 1975 for $50,000, and it's now worth $2 million. But Howland Wanda's property tax is only $1,500 a year. This actually is not that uncommon. If Howland Wanda moved to Texas, their property tax bill is going to go up 10x. Sure, California has no income tax, but Howland Wanda would have to earn more than $250,000 per year in retirement to break even. So these are the type of analyses that we do with our three-legged stool, and means the attorney, financial advisor, CPA. When you retire and you're looking at moving, you need to run the numbers, right? Or staying. If you're, should I stay or should I go? It's, a song from the 80s, but something really to pay attention to, because the dollars are important. It also can drive, maybe if we can talk about when people should retire. So like, when should somebody retire?
That's all relative.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know anybody's health. We don't know their emotional status. And I want to be clear too, retirement doesn't need to be retirement to nothing. I'm in the retire to camp. I eventually want to retire to potentially something else. I don't ever see myself being idle. So I think it's all relative to the individual and your situation. So
let's do this. Let's go through some questions. We get a lot of questions here. I want to answer here. Anonymous asked, does the law still say a beneficiary has to pay back all the money if he inherits? I think that's the payback for Medi-Cal. I think that's what that question is. So long as there is no formal probate, so long as there is not a notice of petition to administer estate under the probate code, which is what we call a formal probate, the state of California is barred from asserting a creditor's claim. They cannot get paid back. So if you have a living trust, all your assets are in a living trust, that tends to get the job done to avoid reimbursement. Jeannie asks, do you have to buy a home at or less than the sale value of your Prop 13 house? No, you can buy a house for greater. So if you sell your home, your condo for 700,000 and you buy a home for 800,000, that extra 100,000 is just going to get added to your tax base. So it would be $1,000 more a year in property tax. We cover that in other webinars. And Ashley, maybe you can put some links to the other webinars in the notes when this goes up on YouTube. Does Prop 13 help if you're downsizing? Sarah asks. Absolutely. So you can go from a home that's assessed at, or you sell a home for $1 million and you buy a home for 800,000. You're going to be able to transfer your property tax base. By the way, you have to be 55 and over. So I didn't really, this is retiring. I'm assuming people are 55 and over, but at least one spouse has to be 55 or over, or one registered domestic partner has to be 55 or over. And again, we cover this on other webinars at length, in depth. So if I pay tax, Anonymous asks, so if I pay taxes on a $1.4 million house in Sacramento, then sell it to buy a $5 million house in Newport Beach, I'm assuming N Beach is Newport Beach. What are my property taxes on the $5 million house? It would be your property tax that it is now on the 1.4 million, whatever that is, plus the essentially 1% plus. So 1% or maybe a little bit more on the delta between 5 million and 1.4 million, or 3.6 million. And so that would be at least $36,000 more per year, but not 50,000. Okay. Because you're getting a little bit of that benefit. Rob says, I think you meant Texas has no income tax in the last example. Yes, correct. Texas has no income tax, but the property tax is significantly higher. Thank you. Anonymous says, not pertinent to this seminar. I have a bank account that just has my 30-year-old grandchild as beneficiary POD. Just 30,000. I haven't gifted anything over the years. My estate is less than 2 million. His parents are still alive, but I wanted to bypass them with this money. They get the rest of the assets. Someone advised me that the bypassing of the generation would result in the generation skipping tax on the 30,000 of my grandchild. I think that applies to larger estates. Would this POD to a grandchild be taxed as generation skipping? There is a generation skipping transfer tax exemption amount this year of $13.61 million. It is probably going to go down to 7.2 million in 2026. I don't think you have anything to worry about with respect to the GST. And that's great that you're giving your grandkid 30,000. Understand POD means the executor has no say over that account. So whoever's handling the estate, so the grandchild would have to have your death certificate, go into the bank, get the money, and that's just a great gift for your grandkid. Really good idea. Let's look at a case study. Abel and Baker retire to California. Now, if you're living in California and thinking, I'm out of here, California's driving me nuts, you might ask yourself, who on earth retires to California? Well, I can tell you, lots of people move to California to retire. Okay. This is not an uncommon situation. These tend to be wealthier people, frankly. These are people with means. But a lot of people do retire to California. So Abel and Baker are each 60 and have just, now there's a lot in this example, and we're going to unpack this. Abel and Baker are each 60 years old and have just retired from corporate jobs. So these were W-2 earners, and they own a home, a $2 million home in New Jersey with no mortgage, 5 million in 401ks. Now, is this common to see 60-year-olds with 5 million in 401ks, Alissa? Yeah, it is, right? Yeah. If they've been saving and 3 million in investments outside of their 401k. So they've done well. Abel and Baker want to end up in California, but would also like to travel while in their go-go years of retirement in their 60s. They've been spending too much time on Instagram and looking at Portofino, and they don't realize when they get there, it's like, whoa, there's a lot of people here, right? That's in Italy, by the way. So a lot of people want to travel in their 60s. They want to get out there while your knees are still good and you still have the desire to travel, and maybe before you have grandkids. I don't know where you are in your life. A lot of people do travel in their 60s. What can Abel and Baker do? Now, I do want to mention one thing, and I don't know if we have it in the slide deck, but net unrealized appreciation. So do you want to talk about that and why you shouldn't just knee-jerk roll over an IRA?
Yes. So most people that have 5 million in their 401k typically have some sort of corporate stock and things like that. So when it comes to corporate stock, it is treated differently than any other assets inside of your 401k. If you have an advisor that just advises you to roll the entire amount over to an IRA, stop. come meet with Ascent. We will analyze all of the stock inside of your 401k. You can't have the stock ever touch an IRA, otherwise you lose the net unrealized appreciation ability. What that is any time that you have stock inside of a 401k plan, whatever cost basis that is on that stock when you acquired this stock inside your 401k, that gets taxed when it leaves the 401k and goes to an individual joint trust account, a non-tax deferred account. That gets taxed all in 1 year as ordinary income, but it preserves the amount that has been gained since you acquired it. So if you acquire that stock at $10 a share, it's now worth $100. You get taxed as ordinary income on $10 a share. So that's $10 of ordinary income, but you preserve $90 of capital gains tax, which is at a lesser tax rate than ordinary income, and you preserve that net unrealized appreciation. The 90 is the unrealized appreciation. If it rolls to an IRA, the $10 is gone, the entire 100 is taxable as ordinary income. So it's very, very critical and important to save potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes when you're talking about corporate stock inside of a 401k.
Yeah. And here's why this is important. In our example, Abel and Baker is 60. And if they retire, they don't have any income. Right now, they may have some investment. Let's assume they don't have any income from their investments. They don't have any income. There's no capital gain. If you're married filing jointly, there's no capital gains taxes on the first 94,000 in capital gain for 2024. Not the first 94,000. Now, if the stock's really appreciated, right, and it's this $10 and 100, you might want to take out some as income and the other is capital gain, and do that every year, maybe for 10 years, maybe for 15 years, right, until you hit your required minimum distribution. So I think I would say the mistake I see, and just looking at this another way, one real big mistake I see people make is they look at taxes and investments and tax planning in 1 year segments. So what did the stock market do last year? What's it going to do this year? What were my taxes last year? What are my taxes this year? If you take a broader time horizon, right, I think you have more tools to pay less tax. Now, if I had a $5 million IRA, that capital gains tax treatment is very important, because even the maximum rate currently is 20% for capital gain, but the income's 37%, and we're talking federal. Now, of course, state income tax in California, it's just, it's capital gain income. It's not going to matter. It's the same tax. So what do Abel and Baker do? So Abel and Baker, they're 60. They're living in New Jersey. They say, hey, we're retiring. They lease their home in New Jersey to a tenant. Abel and Baker create an LLC and put their investments into the LLC and name a US-based manager for the LLC. Abel and Baker rent an apartment in Miami and start traveling the world and stop being New Jersey residents. Now, it's kind of hard to extricate yourself from New Jersey, so we're just going to sidestep all those issues. During the time, Abel and Baker have no income. They may not even be US residents, okay? Now, they have a home base. A lot of people do like to have a home base that they can come back to. And I use Miami because Florida has no state income tax. The reason we have set up an LLC is, the wrinkle on this is, if Abel and Baker become residents of Portugal, let's say, and you have a securities account, you really can't have a securities account and be a resident of Portugal. You can't have a US securities account. So that's a regulatory issue. So that's something, if you are, if you're getting a job transfer to the UK or a job transfer to Europe or wherever it is, really pay attention to this. Talk to your advisor. If you don't have an advisor, call Alissa and they can help you with that. So during this time, Abel and Baker have no income. They're not paying any state income tax to New Jersey. They're not paying any state income tax to California because they're not there yet. Abel and Baker begin annual Roth conversions. Okay, so we see this a lot, Alissa. And you want to talk about a little bit how that works. If you're 60 and not having any earned income, how much are you converting to a Roth that you're seeing in the real world?
Yeah, so we have a lot of clients that fall in that range between 60 and 73, where there's like a 13, even 65 and 73. Somebody might retire at 65. There's 8 years of time frame that you have no earned income. That if you have been deferring income all along, all the way until you retire at age 65, you've not paid taxes on all this income that's backloaded. It's backloaded in your end years or later years in retirement, where you would be potentially kicking yourself into much higher tax bracket than you were when you were working. So how do we take advantage of this lower income tax environment in the 65 to 73 timeframe and shift some of that income over by doing Roth conversions? and maxing out those brackets. We're seeing a ton of conversions right now, especially this tax year and next tax year before the tax law sunset. So there's a really narrow window of opportunity for some people, but there's also potentially a longer runway where we can analyze how much taxable income you are expected to have based on required minimum distributions. And that's why pre-planning, all of this whole conversation that we've been having today has been about pre-planning. Pre-plan before you move out of state. Pre-plan before you make decisions that potentially could impact on not only while you're living, but also after you pass away. What's the total impact versus just making an potentially emotional decision without looking at the implications from a tax, estate, and financial planning perspective?
I would say just on a very high level, we don't really see a lot. I mean, there is a use case for a Roth conversion if you're paying taxes at higher than a 24% rate, but that's typically for estate tax purposes. But I would say broadly speaking, we see, you don't see people going beyond the 24% tax bracket as a general rule.
Because you jump from 24 to 32 right now. Right. And so right now there's not a whole lot of window of opportunity except for maxing out that 24. Above that, it's the break even is often not there.
But if let's say you're a single person with a $25 million estate and $5 million in IRAs, that $5 million is subject to death tax today of 40%. Yeah. So if you have a $5 million retirement account, $2 million, your beneficiaries, your heirs have to pay $2 million on that 5 in death tax. And when they turn around and pull the money out, they're going to have to pay another $2.5 million in tax. So that's $4.5 million on a $5 million IRA. You would be much better off. I'm not saying doing it, but looking at a Roth conversion, even if you pay a lot of income tax, because that tax is out of your estate. So again, if you're higher net worth, these are different planning strategies for people at different levels of net worth. But if you have a taxable estate, not doing a Roth IRA, I think is a pretty serious financial mistake.
You pointed out a really good point is the estate tax is 40%. It's going up to 45. Estate tax being 45 versus your income tax, ordinary income tax. That difference might be 18, 20%. So you bring a really good point.
So what Abel and Baker? So they rent their house out in New Jersey. They're traveling the world after 2 years. And it's important because in order to pull out $500,000 in gain on a property, you have to have lived there 2 of the last 5 years. So after 2 years, but not after 2 years, but not after 3 years, they sell their home. They keep $500,000 of gain that they're able to pull out, and they effectuate a 1031 exchange to this beautiful floating home in Sausalito, which actually went to the open house maybe a month or so ago. Beautiful view of the San Francisco Bay. That is a floating home with a concrete hull. They rent this out. This rents out for gobs of money. Okay. So they continue to travel. They effectuate Roth conversions, and they're not a resident of New Jersey or California. They are subject to California source income tax on the net income minus depreciation of their floating home there in Sausalito. Once Abel and Baker are done globetrotting, they move into the floating home. Their Social Security will not be taxed. Their Roth distributions will not be taxed federally or state because they already did the Roth conversion. They paid the taxes. They'll be protected by Prop 13. What do I mean by that? Meaning their taxes cannot go up more than 2% a year. And the investment income is subject to taxation. But this is sort of threading the needle on being out of New Jersey and California and doing your Roth conversions and still ending up in California. So we kind of look at California, Oregon, New Jersey, and North Carolina. The lowest tax, believe it or not, is actually New Jersey, which is kind of weird because you would think, gee, well, North Carolina seems like they have a flat tax. New Jersey's is graduated. California actually comes in pretty low. If you have $50,000 in income and married filing jointly, it's $840,000 or $840 in income tax. So it's important to pay attention to that, especially when you're doing Roth conversion. Now, there's there's a little bit of a technical thing here, which is pretty big, because Abel and Baker lived outside of California for part of their marriage, or a lot of their marriage. When they both moved to California, everything becomes what is called quasi-community property, meaning it is treated like community property for divorce. So if Abel wants to divorce Baker, it's going to be kind of a 50-50 split. Or if Baker wants to divorce Abel, and it depends on how the money kind of settles up on that. So it does change rights of spouses at dissolution if you get a divorce. Abel and Baker consult with Cunningham Legal to revise their living trust centered estate plan ensure full utilization of adjusted cost basis of a spouse, inheritance protection from future ex-sons-in-law and future ex-daughters-in-law. Super important, right? Your kid marries another kid, right? And that marriage doesn't work out. Well, what you leave that child, right, may end up in the ex's pockets or part of it, and provides Abel and Baker with peace of mind. That's really why people do this planning. Estate planning is peace of mind. Let's look at Hank and Wendy leaving California. Hank and Wendy are 60 years old and they're CalPERS retirees. They plan on relocating to Tennessee to be closer to their grown children. So again, there are non-tax reasons for moving. They want to see their grandkids. They love Tennessee. Maybe they don't love it. Maybe they can tolerate it or like it. I'm not throwing shade on Tennessee. I don't know. Their pensions will be taxable in California, but not Tennessee. So Hank and Wendy have $1 million home in Sacramento with no mortgage and savings and investments of $500,000. We see this. This is a common pattern we see with people who are employed, government employees. What can they do when they retire? Well, they sell their home in Sacramento. They paid $300,000. There's $100,000 in improvements, realtor fees and costs of $50,000, and they can exempt $500,000 in capital gains. So not a whole lot of capital gains tax, frankly. Meaning by the time you have your purchase price plus improvements minus the cost of selling the property, and they buy this beautiful home of $800,000 home, $2,500 a year in property tax. So really not that bad on an $800,000 home. If you think about it, it's less than a new $800,000 home would be in California. This saves $12,000 per year in state income tax, which is a lot of money for people, right? $12,000 a year. I mean, that's a couple nice vacations. Peace of mind, more money in your pockets. So that is the use case for moving outside of California. These are people, maybe they're not doing the Roth conversion, they're living off pensions. And I believe the figure is 85% of public employees retire outside of California. So it's a significant number. I don't know if you have many state employees, Alissa, and whether they're moving out of California or not.
I would say we don't have as many state employees. But I mean, to this point on this case study, it goes back to the emotional side of why you would move. I mean, that's an individualized decision. I don't like bugs. I don't like snakes. I don't like humidity, and I don't want to shovel snow. So there's not a lot of options for me to move.
Or chunk away at ice. So Tennessee's not for you. My family years ago, my ancestors are from North Carolina and Virginia and Tennessee. So there's many moons ago, and they slowly moved west. So Tennessee is not a community property state. So Hank and Wendy consult with Cunningham Legal to revise their living trust centered estate plan, inheritance protection from future ex-sons-in-law and future ex-daughters-in-law, provide Hank and Wendy with peace of mind. Let's look at Charlie and Delta, who stay in California. Charlie and Delta are 60. Charlie and Delta have a $2 million home in Los Angeles with no mortgage, $1 million in 401ks, and a business valued at $10 million. It's actually a very common situation for many of our clients. They built a small business that they are able to sell. Now, if you have built a business and you are not able to sell it, I'm really sorry to hear that. And that is not uncommon, but for many people, they do sell their business. Charlie and Delta want to stay in California, but they want to move to the desert full time. Now, for those of you who don't know what the desert is that area east of Los Angeles, in that sort of Palm Springs, La Quinta, Rancho Mirage area. So they want to move from LA out to the desert full time. What can they do? Well, Charlie and Delta sell their home in LA. They transfer their low Prop 13 taxes to the new desert property, right? Charlie and Delta use artful income, business, and estate planning to spread out the proceeds from the sale of their business so that the 37 to 53% of the sales proceeds aren't paid all at once, but because they need this money to retire. So here's the problem. If you have a business worth $10 million and you sell it in California, certainly if it's an S corporation, you're probably going to pay close to 50% in tax. So you're going to only end up with $5 million. If you know you're going to sell your business, and look, if you're a business owner, I firmly think you need to run your business as if you're going to sell it. Knowing that you may sell it, there are ways to recapitalize your business, but it typically requires a 5-year waiting period. But there are ways to recapitalize your business in a manner where you can have more tax efficiency. So broadly speaking, there are a lot of strategies out there, and there's definitely not one size fits all. There are a lot of different situations and different approaches, and this is a customized, tailored approach. There's no way around it. But what do? Well, they transfer their low Prop 13 taxes, this beautiful home in La Quinta. They're on a golf course with a pool. I mean, gosh, it's like you're on vacation all the time. They realize their sales proceeds over time, right, from their business, and not overnight, not in 1 year. So they're not paying 5 million, but that 10 million, maybe they're netting out, maybe they're paying 2.5 million or 2 million in tax, right? Whatever the numbers happen to be. And they pay less overall. A lot of times what we're talking about here is tax bracket arbitrage. So if you have 10 million in income, you're going to be at the maximum rates, from the get-go. But if you could spread out that 10 million over 25 or 30 years, it pushes you into lower tax brackets. So that's really what we're talking about. We can accomplish this given enough time and given enough planning. There are many strategies to reduce the impact, the overall impact of taxes. They move their Prop 13 tax base to a new home. This involves the sale of one property. This is very, very important. There's a form that's filled out that is filed with the Riverside County assessor when they buy their replacement property. They have to sell their home in LA. That home must be fully reassessed. So if you sell it to a kid, there's a parent to child reassessment exclusion. You're not going to be able to move your Prop 13 tax base. So it has to be sold typically to a random person who comes in who wants to buy your house, right? That's sold. Then you can move your property tax. There are time limitations on it. There are forms to file. This is something we help with clients, typically in the estate planning engagement. And this minimization of capital gains tax on the sale of the business and the home, they're going to face a huge tax bill. When they sell that home for $2 million, right? They're going to have capital gains taxes. Well, we work with them to mitigate those capital gains taxes. There are a lot that you can do. So they consult with their A team, which happens in this case to be myself, Alissa, and their CPA. And we craft a plan that reduces the overall tax bite and creates more wealth for Charlie and Delta. But again, planning over time, not overnight, right? Thinking about this in a series of years. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And this is the end of our content, and we're going to give you a teaser of what's coming up next, and then we'll answer questions here. So we have offices in Northern and Southern California, and Ascent has offices. This is their phone number as well as our phone numbers. I don't even know if we need area codes anymore or different numbers. I don't know that people are charged long distance anymore. I think everyone has a cell phone. But we'll open it up for questions. We do have some questions that we're going to cover. If you have a question, please put this in the Q&A in our YouTube page. And Alissa, thank you for joining us today. This brings us to the end of the video if you're watching this on YouTube. And just keep watching, because next time another video is just going to roll right up magically after this one. So let's get to the questions. And for those of you who have gutted it out, you've reached the bitter end. Let's see. Q&A. Jaspreet asks, moving to Texas from California, isn't that a smart move based on the points below? What am I missing? 1, no SDI tax. California removed wage cap from 2024, so SDI is unlimited. No HSA tax with high deductible plan. No state income tax, yes. No capital gains tax on investments, yes. Texans are ahead with 14% capital gains even before any investment. Well, it's 20 is the marginal rate. Sales tax is equivalent. Less expensive real estate, maybe. You can afford a mansion for $2 million, maybe, but your property taxes are higher. Low cost of living, cheap utilities. That's if you will have electricity. I know they've had some issues delivering electricity because of growth. Doctor visits, gas, restaurants, high property tax. Yeah. If you take into account the savings from 1 to 7, Texas wins. Jaspreet, that may be for you. I would visit and spend some time there. So one thing that comes up, and Alissa, I don't know if this is solicited or unsolicited advice you give to clients. I generally say you might want to hold on to your house in California for a little bit. And then rent where you want to live and give it a year.
Yep. We advise clients to Airbnb for a month in the worst month that you could possibly go. So Texas, for me, that'd be in the peak of the middle of the summer. I would never survive in Texas. Granted, you can do the 6 months out of the year thing and do snowbirds and all that stuff, but go live somewhere, actually physically live there for an extended period of time, not a week. Go there for at least a month or 2, decide if you like it before fully committing, but try to keep your house for at least a year before you decide to commit.
California is a very diverse state that also tolerates a lot of different people, if that makes sense. Not every state is like that. Not every part of every state is like that. So just something to be mindful of if you think, hmm, you're kind of making a point there. I think trying it out is a really good idea. Anonymous asks, I have title to my home as solo single woman. I just remarried and my current spouse has plenty of debt prior to our marriage, small business loan and IRS. Can that be attached to my home now that we're married? Oh, I don't know. There's not enough information here. Um, I don't have an answer to that question. I would talk to a CPA about that. You may want to consider filing separately, married filing separately, but I would talk to a CPA about that. Anonymous asks, what are the pros and cons of changing my California home title from sole single owner to add my husband as joint? Well, it would likely be transmuted to community property. I mean, just given these facts here, it's not a taxable gift if you are in fact married. There's no change in ownership. Transfers between married people or registered domestic partners in California are not changes in ownership, so there's no change to your property taxes. But it is a gift, right? Maybe it's not though, right? Maybe that property was acquired with community property and you were the only one on title. So I think that's something we would want to talk about one-on-one. But the big one is, your husband would now, I'm assuming you'd go 50-50, your husband would be on title for half. Anonymous asks, if Trump wins, will the tax rate go down, which would affect whether you should max out your IRA conversion to Roth? I have no idea who's going to win.
I don't think they're going down either. I think we're at the threshold of what we can get it to. If anything, they're going to extend the current tax law, but I don't think they're going down further than they already are. I think we're kind of where we're going to see the lowest tax environment, and anything beyond this outside of an extension would be going up.
Historically, we are very low.
Correct.
I would see potentially going back to what taxes were like in the 50s, 60s, 70s, which is higher nominal rates and then tax credits for certain deployment of capital. So if I'm making $1 million a year, the government says we're going to tax you at your highest marginal rate of 70%, right? Anything over 700,000 is taxed at 70%. I'm just making this up. But if you invest that 300,000 in a way that we want you to invest it in, we'll give you a tax break. And that's kind of how the tax system worked. I could see a return to that. Don't Abel and Baker have to pay back the forced depreciation when they move into the floating home? No, because they're taking a rental and converting it to a personal asset. It's when they sell it, right? So, but you have to have it as a rental for a couple of years, and then they move back in and convert it to personal use. Anonymous asked, deeding California dated April 1, 2021. My living trust has it dated as April 2nd, 2021. Do I have to do an amendment because the one-day error was that typo I didn't catch, but estate planner wants $500 for any amendment? Yeah, it's a correcting deed. I think if the attorney, I hope it wasn't us, but I think if the attorney made the mistake, they should fix it. It would be a correcting deed, is what we would typically look at. Anonymous, my husband, after 50 years of marriage, divorced me. And oh my gosh, and joined a cult, redoing his trust to give all his money to his church. Can his new trust be contested by his children, or does he have to be deemed incompetent? Everyone has a right to contest a trust. Everyone's entitled to their day in court. Sad to hear that, but they certainly have a right to contest it. Whether they'll be successful or not, I couldn't say. Jaspreet says, thank you. All right, Jaspreet. Kimberly says, my wife is not on title to two of our properties, primary home and an investment property. We live in California. We're planning to put the properties in a trust. Should we put my wife on title before putting them into the trust? And can she be added if she's not on the loan? Boy, Kimberly, that's an interesting question. I think the issues I would be looking at as a lawyer is, did you acquire those properties before you were married or after you were married? And if you acquired them after you were married, were those properties acquired with community property or separate property? But I think if you want the benefits of an adjusted cost basis, if your spouse were to die before you, then you would want to make sure that you have that held as community property. Okay. The problem with holding it as community property is that may involve what's called a transmutation. So you acquired this property, if you acquired it before getting married, arguably it's separate property. So I think it's something you should be discussing one-on-one with an estate planning attorney. Very important consideration. You have an update here. Rental property was before marriage. Primary home was during marriage. Yeah. Again, Kimberly, that's one that's tough to answer because We would have to look at the source of income. Do you have a prenuptial? Do you have a postnup? But these are things that we deal with on a daily basis at our firm and can walk you through the issues. And so you can make an informed decision. I would say making an informed decision is the best method. Alissa, wouldn't you agree? Because this is really what we're talking about here, informed decision. You need to know what you're getting into, right?
Right.
Because sometimes people sign stuff and they have no idea and they go, oh, years later, some bad outcome happens for that person because I just signed pieces of paper. I don't know. I mean, when clients look at this stuff, by the way, if you have signed legal documents, you may look at these and be like, thinking to yourself, I don't understand a word that's on here. It's all mumbo jumbo. You're relying on the human on the other side, right? To make sure that it's all right. And that's our job as professionals, both Alissa and me. Our job is to make sure that we listen to you, we counsel you, and then we take appropriate action. That you have to understand what you're doing just from a legal standpoint. But in reality, do you really understand what's going on? I don't know. I mean, Anonymous says, I'm 65, still working, maybe 2 more years. I'm contributing 22% of my income split into 401k, 51 to IRA, 20% of my income into a 401k, 50% IRA, 50% Roth 401k. Should I switch to 100% Roth? Ooh.
I would love to answer this question.
Go for it.
So really this question is unique to you. How much income do you have? How much do you have in retirement assets? What's the implication when you're going to start taking out withdrawals? I really think that you should meet with an advisor, a certified financial planner, ideally, to analyze what's the break even. Does it make sense? Do you need the tax write-offs now? Really, are you going to do Roth conversions in the future? Would it be something that you would be potentially doing and taking advantage of now? There's so many elements to that question that would be unique to your situation.
Actually, they may be better off, just without giving specific advice. If you're going to retire at 67 and you don't have required minimum distributions until 73, you might be better off, depending on what your other income is, putting it all into non-Roth, right? Because you're taking a deduction and then do a Roth conversion in that 5-year window. Maybe.
Correct. Once the income is turned off, yes, correct.
Right. And that's why it's important. So maybe, I guess.
But it depends on what your income threshold is.
Yeah.
If you're not on the top end of the 24, it really depends. It really depends.
It's math. And that's why, what are the numbers? And a lot of this is driven by math. And this is why you need the CPA and financial advisor. Lawyers are really bad at math, except personal injury lawyers. They can always divide something by 3 because that's their fee. If you meet a personal injury lawyer, this is just a little side note, ask that lawyer, just come up with some random number and say, what's a third of $62,522? And they're going to get it probably to the penny. Mary asks, can you go over again the difference between community property and joint tenancy? Yes. Community property is all property acquired during marriage except by inheritance or gift, right? Now, here's the wrinkle. If there are spouses, or in California, registered domestic partner, which is interchangeable with spouse, if the property is titled as community property or joint tenancy, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but it kind of doesn't matter because the court is going to look at the source of like who contributed what at what time. Okay. The court's going to look at the underlying facts and make a division of property between 2 living people. When one of those spouses or registered domestic partner dies, title controls. The rules are different at death. If it's joint tenancy, you only get a 50% step up in basis. So 2 spouses, not registered domestic partners, because that's state only. It's very important to understand. Spouses, when one spouse dies, you get a full adjusted cost basis on that property if it's titled as if the title is community property, or if it's in a trust as community property. But if it's as a joint tenancy, you're only going to have 50% adjusted basis. Joni asks, if I sell my property and move into an ADU I'm building on one of my rental properties, can I sell the rental property with the main house and the ADU in 2 years and avoid capital gains? I would say, capital gain is acquisition price, just for our purposes, plus improvements minus depreciation. When you convert that to a rental to a personal use asset, you're going to exempt capital gain, so the increase in value, but you do have recapture of depreciation, and that's taxed federally at 25%. So a little bit more complicated, but that's something you'd want to talk one-on-one with your tax advisor. Anonymous asks, not on the top end, 1.4 million in investments. I have a financial planner, just looking for another viewpoint, looking at leaving California for other reasons. Weather isn't everything. Many other variables in California to look at. Thank you for your previous reply. Okay, anonymous. Thank you. If you have any other questions, Alissa, this has been fun.
Great.
I've really enjoyed the time we've spent here. I think there's a lot of valuable information in here, and I think for people who are making that big decision on should you stay in California or go, or should you move to California? Lots to think about, right? Lots to think about. So
Yep.
thanks for spending time with us, and thank you for watching. This will be up on YouTube, I believe, right around 6 p.m. Oh, no, it won't be up because it's got to go through your compliance. So we're going to have, I think our charitable trust is going to be up. Is that correct, Ashley? Our charitable trust will be up at 6, charitable trust material.
Yep.
Great. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.